Now, John BJE is up next. What do you say about this bloke? Still climbing mountains at his age. He's an inspiration to a lot of others. Licensed in 1976 as VK3 YFL with a limited licence, is that right? March 1977 became VK3 BJE, and then June 1982 became VK5 BJE. Radio is a hobby, is written here, not employment related. He's been a member of the WIA since 1974, member of the ARRL since 2000, Secretary of WISN for 6 years between 2003 to 2009. You're going to have to help me here, John. You're riding a shotgun, mate.
I just said something about employment because I've never been employed in the radio world. I was a bureaucrat. Please don't hate me for that. And university teacher, and my qualifications are entirely in areas unrelated to radio.
So there you go. Welcome, John. And he is an inspiration. This bloke climbs mountains at his age, so well done, John.
Thanks very much, Paul. What I have here in my hand are two bits of technology. A tiny little variable capacitor, and Barry said this one was about 270 PF maximum capacity, down to about 8. And in this hand I have a 33 microfarad electrolytic, probably about 50 volts working DC. Now, what can you tell me from the floor scientifically about these components? What do they do? 3 simple answers. They store energy, correct. What else? They block DC. I was taught that anyway, except when they start to leak. And a third thing, very important.
Tune circuits.
They tune circuits, but what's behind that? That's descriptive. What's the scientific concept behind tuning a circuit? Resonance, but they pass RF, don't they? They pass AC. So they block DC, they pass AC, and they store energy. Now, I left my 1 farad capacitor out in the car. When you drive down the bottom of the freeway and you stop at the bottom of the hill, you'll often see cars where the sides are moving in and out to the beat of the rhythm. Those cars, to supply the power, need not only the 12-volt system, but probably a 1 farad capacitor as well. Store the energy. So that's all I'm going to say today about the technology in amateur radio. What I want to do is say something about the art of amateur radio. Pity about the glare there. This comes from our regulator. The amateur service is designed primarily to facilitate hobby communications and for technical experimentation, and operates on specified frequency bands. Amateur radio operators communicate. Now, I've emphasised the word communicate, using transmission modes including but not limited to Morse code, telephony and data. Very important. Now I can't see my notes. Thanks for putting the light. So we can have the lights, please.
Don't need enough carrots.
Now, I'm not going to go through all the detail of the regulations. It's a boring topic, but it's a topic that we fail to concentrate on at our own peril. I just want to say something about call signs and operating procedures. A call sign is constructed as a unique identifier by ACMA. We're all given one. There are no bad call signs. There are good ones, excellent ones really, and slightly inferior ones. What do you think identifies a really good call sign? Think carefully.
The phonetics of the letter.
The phonetics of the letter. And what would you go to beyond that, Steve? What's the next level? What are you actually looking at? you're looking at the creation of sound, how human beings make sound. A really good call sign, I'll bring Brian into the scene. Brian's talking later. VK5, Bravo, Charlie. What makes these suffix so good?
You can differentiate the letters quite clearly.
Do you know what the letters are?
Charlotte, BC.
Yeah, what's beneath that? What's the actual part of speech?
Single syllable.
Phonetic
No, they're consonants.
enunciation.
When you say a Bravo or a Charlie, what do you actually do with your mouth? Just say Bravo. Requires the mouth to be closed and then opened. A poor call sign might have maybe one, possibly even two vowels in it. What's wrong with a vowel? How do you say a vowel? Who knows the vowels? Mouth open. The vowel is created simply by the passing of air through the mouth and from the lungs through the mouth. It doesn't require that additional percussive effect that stating a consonant requires. So if you use, if you've got a call sign with a vowel, and in my case a very weak vowel on the end, and you're trying to work DX, it creates problems. The echo in my call sign is a pain. But I've had the call sign for, 37, 38 years. I'm not going to trade it in. So I live with the weakness of the echo. We all should know our call signs and know the strengths and weaknesses of how they work. Now I've got some pictures which I'll put up in the end, which Barry kindly helped me save on a digital oscilloscope last weekend, and I've got the three letters of my call there, which will give you some idea of the power in each of those three letters of the suffix in a peak envelope picture, RF envelope. And you'll see the letter Juliet, or the word Juliet, the letter J, a consonant, has three sections to it because it's a three-syllable word and it never gets missed. Bravo, in my call sign, requires more power than any other of the three letters. Why? Because you've got two very strong consonants beginning the letter, beginning the phonetic word Bravo. You've got B and R, Bravo, and the screen fills on the oscilloscope. Very important. And very few amateurs really think about this. And if you, like last weekend, listen on 40 metres to people out in the parks and on summits, you'll hear even advanced call holders race through their call sign at the speed of light. Who's heard that? You'll hear it every weekend. Every weekend. And the operator who's trying to hear these folk has then got to say, what's the last letter? Or can you repeat your call sign, please? Can you slow down? Now, I always ask people to slow down. It's not because I'm aged, I know I am, but I do it as a way of getting across a message to people that if you don't get the call sign properly copied down, the contact doesn't count. It's meaningless. It's meaningless for them as well, and they probably don't realise this. They want to confirm it, they want to count it. It doesn't carry any value. So stating the call sign clearly, enunciating it in a way which people can understand is really critical. So you need to know how to say it phonetically using the NATO preferred phonetics. But is it permissible to deviate from the NATO phonetics? It is. Why would you want to deviate from the NATO phonetics we're required to learn for our examination?
For international stations.
For international
No
stations.
English words.
Who can pick out a letter which gives problems to overseas stations in the way we use our NATO phonetics?
Hotel.
Hotel? What's the problem with that, Andy?
Doesn't occur in Spanish, Latin languages.
What about Juliet? No J in the Italian language. What about S? What about Papa? Paul's got a problem with Papa, I think, haven't you, Paul?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the Russians struggle with it. So it is permissible to move to the older letters. Papa becomes Pacific, Oscar becomes Ocean, and so on. Zulu becomes Zebra. I had an old mate who was a broadcast operator, amateur, Ron Kelton, VK5, Zulu Romeo. But what's better? Zebra radio. Far more preferable, far easier to understand than Zulu Romeo, which are the preferred phonetics. My rule of thumb is always use the preferred phonetics, and if people don't understand them, swap. My call often goes Boston, Japan, England. England is a much stronger word than echo. And even if I pronounce echo in the way Ackman suggests, which is echo, the emphasis on the first syllable, England gets picked up where echo won't. I missed a 5-watt contact about 2 or 3 weekends ago with a bloke in Italy. I struggled with the E, and in the end he couldn't copy it. And yet the rest of our transmission was fine. He just couldn't get the call sign, so the contact is invalid. So enough on call signs. Excuse me. Frequency of identification. What's the ACMA requirement for identifying? Once every 10 minutes. What should you say at the end of the 10 minutes? You say this is VK5 BJE or VK5 Bravo Charlie, whatever your call sign is. What's the correct way of identifying when you're portable? Or mobile? If I was in a park in New South Wales and I was recently in Eurobodalla National Park, the proper way, the ACMA way of identifying is saying this is VK5 Bravo Juliet Echo, portable in New South Wales in Eurobodalla National Park. Now if you're having 3 or 4 contacts in every 10 minutes, you're not going to say that every time you finish and start a contact, although you are required to identify it. So it becomes quite permissible within the 10 minutes to say VK5 BJE, port 2. But the rules require you to identify fully. The LCD is quite specific about that. Okay. Listen on the frequency before you transmit. Every weekend on 40 metres, you'll hear people tune up. They operate their manual antenna couplers, impedance matching devices. Oh, tuners, I forgot what they're called. And they whack out a great big signal over the top of 5-watt stations. Now, sometimes it's, even for an experienced operator, it is easy sometimes to have a voice interjection over someone else's contact. You can listen on the frequency, as I do, and sometimes you can have what seems like an interminable nothingness, even up to a minute. And you might say VK5 BJE, and then suddenly something emerges out of the ether and you feel like crawling away. We will all make those mistakes. But that's very different from tuning up, deliberately interfering with another transmission, and it happens all of the time. Every weekend I hear it. Now, it's not through overeager, enthusiastic operation that this occurs. It occurs because of either not caring, not knowing the regulations, not being properly socialised into the hobby, and not behaving in a way which is human-friendly. The old term used to be gentlemanly.
What about the horrible noises these automatic antenna tuners make?
Well, the way you're foreshadowing my discussion this afternoon when I'll talk about it, but I'll simply say here, you find a clear frequency, tune up, identify, and then move to the frequency where you want to operate. Yeah, they're a terrible thing. Terrible thing. Unidentified transmissions. Listen on the repeaters, you'll hear dozens and dozens and dozens of unidentified transmissions. Kachunkas. And it's illegal. if you said to those people their behaviour is an offence under the law, you'd probably be inviting a fist into your face. But it is illegal behaviour. And I don't know why people do it. It's just so easy. If you want to check that a repeater is accessible, press the button and announce your call sign. Simple. Why can't people do it? And the other thing that I find really, really interesting is you hear young people starting off in the hobby as F calls. They'll announce, this is VK5XYZ, FFXYZ on the repeater, and no one answers them. And I found even driving around the place all over this country and in New Zealand, if you just say PK5BJE listening, very rarely will you ever get a response on a repeater. So what's happening there? One way that usually works for me is to say VK5BJE test, and I've found not 100% of the occasions, but nearly always someone will come back. And then the challenge for me is, how do I engage that person in a contact? And they come back and I say, oh boy, that audio you've got is absolutely stunning. Tell me about your rig. I know, but it works. It works. And I think these are the sorts of things we should be teaching our prospective F-call people. Inappropriate and bad language. I've heard amateurs use appalling language on both 2 metres and 80 metres. Absolutely appalling language. Is it illegal? It's a moot point. We're not sure. But they say, oh, but SBS has crook language. SBS is a broadcaster, and the rules, and the ABC and the commercial channels, there are rules applying, and the rules are what? They have to give it a warning at the start of the program that there may be, they use the term bad, strong, other language being used, and people have an option of turning off. Once upon a time you could listen to the repeaters with children in the car and other people, older people who grew up in a non-bad language environment, and you could do that safely, but those days are well and truly gone. I think it's, and I'm not making a moral judgment about how people speak. If people want to swear, that's fine. All I'm saying, maybe it shouldn't be on the airwaves. And I don't know whether we'll ever get rid of it, but I think it, my view about this, it demeans our hobby to hear the really crook language on the air. What can you speak about in a contact? Well, each contact is different. If you're chasing DX, you're not going to speak 2 minutes, not going to speak about very much at all. If you're in a rag chew contact, you're going to speak about a lot of things. What do you speak about? You speak about the hobby, your gear, your system, your antennas, but you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion, and you don't talk about race. I hear comments on 80 metres sometimes at night which are absolutely frightful. People expressing opinions they've got no idea about, they've never done any research, and it makes them look really foolish. Best to avoid it. The rules used to be explicit about it, but they're not quite so clear anymore. Just a couple of final shots. With Barry's help, there's the word Bravo. And that's been snapped on a DSO. Juliet, a lot of power in that too. Echo. And that's the problem. Now, these pictures were taken off an 817 driving into a dummy load and using a 1 to 100 RF sampler. If you've got the opportunity to have a look at your RF envelope and your modulation as well, it's well worth doing. Now, I have a handout there with a summary of my paper and an email address if you'd like a copy of both papers. The paper here is about 7 or 8 pages long and it goes into some of the detail which I've missed out. So please help yourself if you're interested. And thanks very much, Nigel, for setting that up for me. Thank you.
capacitors.
Good on you, John. Thanks very much. Okay, David Wilson is up next, VK5 LSB, to talk to you a bit about the DX Code of Conduct. But can I just read